Welcome back, YouTube, to another episode here at WILDMAN Lives. I'm your host, WILDMAN. Now on today's episode, as promised from my last video, we're doing the Training the Carnivore series, and we've moved into the final series. This is where Frank and I made that bet of whether or not he can achieve optimal strength through weight training, and if he would be able to survive the Conjugate Method training program while being on the carnivore diet. Now, I'm going to explain the Conjugate Method, and I want everybody to decide for themselves, looking at how much volume of work this is, if Frank has a shot at actually completing the program. So I think he will complete it because he's got a lot of heart. I just don't think he's going to be able to get the results out of it because it's a very tough program and it involves a lot more eating of the food and a lot more rest, which is something that I don't think his diet's going to support. So allow me to explain the Conjugate Method, and you all can make up your mind for yourself. But I am going to hope and pray that Frank does actually achieve optimal strength while on the carnivore diet. So we're going to find out together. So let me give you the history a little bit about the Conjugate Method. So no, it's not like a conjugal visit. That's what a lot of people assume. Conjugate Method is actually a weight training program that was Americanized. It originally came from the Soviet Union during the Cold War time. And during that time, the Soviet Union athletes in the Olympics were able to beat us in a lot of weightlifting sports. Now, an American named Louis Simmons actually went over to the Soviet Union, came back with their training program, and he had to learn Russian in order to translate it. And he basically figured out how they trained because he was wondering, do they have better steroids than we do? Are they training differently than we do? And the answer was yes, they're training a lot differently than we were at that time. I believe he was actually called a traitor and a communist, which is pretty popular to do back in that time period in the United States. Everything that happened, you were a communist. You knew like 3 Russian words, you're a communist and a Soviet spy. Your dog is urinating on my lawn, you're a communist and a Soviet spy. Kind of like how people do today. They throw out buzzwords too when they don't agree with you or just don't like you. In any case, this guy ended up starting a very famous gym called Westside Barbell, which was in Ohio. And he started producing a lot of weightlifting champions and powerlifting. And so a lot of people wondered, what's he doing? And basically what he did was he took the Soviet Union's weight training program, and then he kind of combined his knowledge and his training culture, which is pretty aggressive, and he made it into a very established gym that became very famous worldwide and was producing champions left and right. And really all it was this style of training, which he called the Conjugate Method. Now, the reason why it's called a method is because it's very fluid in structure. So it doesn't mean like it's set up perfectly and you have to follow it perfectly. Basically, it's like a concept or an idea or a theory. And if you put this into practice, then essentially you're going to be able to get optimal strength out of it, and you'll be able to throw it into pretty much a lot of different weightlifting programs, or you could construct your own, which is what I've done, and you're going to get some mad results. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a generic structure of the Conjugate Method, and then I'm going to show you what we do over here at WILDMAN Lifts, and I'm going to show you how I like to structure Conjugate. So here we go. So pretty much the Conjugate Method focuses on these big barbell lifts: the back squat, the bench press, the deadlift. And if you're a strongman or an Olympic weightlifter or a CrossFitter or whatever, where it involves taking the barbell and pressing it over your head, you can also throw in the overhead press as well. And each of these have these own individual days. The back squat has its own day. So does the bench press, the deadlift, and the overhead press. And the key to this is you would have variation lifts instead of just doing it on a normal barbell. So if you're doing the back squat, you might use an SSB, or you might use a axle bar, or you might use a box and squat down to a box, which might be above parallel, like an inch or two, because that's going to vary the lift very differently. And you could do the same thing with the bench press, the deadlift, and the overhead press. You're going to vary the lifts each week. And what that does is it allows you to push for 1 rep, 2 rep, 3 rep maxes every single week, and you don't need to deload or back off or start over again. Because when you lift very heavy with a barbell and you do a 3 rep, 2 rep, or 1 rep max, Typically, it takes 10 days to recover if you want to do that same lift again. But if you vary the lift, even if it's slight, like such as changing it to a different implement, or squatting down to a box, or bench pressing off of pins, or deadlifting from a deficit or from a rack, these things are going to make it so that you're able to go to those maxes every single week, and you're never going to need to deload. And that's kind of the theory behind conjugate method. So the conjugate method works like this. You have an upper body and a lower body that you're going to work out. So the upper body would be like a bench press or a push press, and the lower body would be a deadlift or a back squat. And then you're going to have maximum effort, and then you're going to have dynamic effort for both of those bodies. So pretty much it's split in half, upper body, lower body, maximum effort and dynamic effort for each one of those. Now, a max effort means you're going to a 3-rep, 1-rep max. That's what that means on one of these variation lifts that we're doing. Dynamic effort is when you lower the weight significantly, but then you're pulling with like maybe 40% of your 1-rep max on a barbell, and you're just trying to master the technique, and you're trying to go as fast as you can through the movement. So conjugate was super popular because people were using bands or they were using chains in order to accomplish this, but you don't really need to. You could just lower the weight to 40% on your dynamic effort days, and you could just pull as fast as you can and really hone in your technique, knowing for a fact that you can lift it. It's really just about getting the repetitions in and not burning out your central nervous system. So this is what a typical week would look like if you were doing conjugate just as it's written. So for week 1, and let's start with Monday, you would do a max effort day and you would do the lower body. So it would be back squat. Then when you were done, you would take Tuesday off, and then Wednesday you would do your max effort upper body, and let's say that's the bench press. Then on your Friday, you would do your dynamic effort day, and you would do deadlift at 40% of your 1-rep max and overhead press at 40% of your 1-rep max. So there you go. You're getting all 4 lifts within 1 week. And then week 2, you would do the same thing, but now lower body is going to be the deadlift. And Wednesday is going to be the overhead press instead of the bench press. And then on Friday for your dynamic effort day, you're going to be doing back squats at 40% and bench press at 40% on that same day. Now make a note, you're not just doing a 3-rep max and that's the end of it, right? You have to actually look into conjugate a lot more to see what it's about. But pretty much after you're done doing your 3-rep max or 1-rep max, whatever was required of you, then you're supposed to do a percentage of what you just hit that day. And then you're supposed to do like 3 sets and do like a max out of volume. Or you could do 1 set and max out at 80%, or you could put it into 3 rounds. It doesn't really matter. What matters is you do a volume portion after you're done and you try to max out that weight the best that you can. Now, I'm a huge fan of conjugate, but I can't stand it. It's very, very hard. And it really didn't make me want to go to the gym that much. And although when I did it just in its basic form, I did gain a lot of strength and a lot of size. But it wasn't until I started doing it the way that I like to structure it, which is the WILDMAN way, when I started really making results, getting bigger, getting stronger, but also I was getting more athletic and more conditioned. And I prefer to do that method because I can get a lot more done in a short amount of time. So the way that WILDMAN likes to do and set up conjugate is I do the same thing. I take variation lifts of those big barbell lifts I just described. I like to do a strength set, which is about 3-rep maxes when I'm first starting out, and then I move into 1-rep max. Again, doing a different variation lift each week, so that way I'm not burning myself out. Then I would do a volume set, and I would either do, it was always 3 sets, but I would take maybe 60% of what I just hit that day, and I would do 8 reps for a set of 3. And then when I do my 1-rep max, whatever I hit, I would take 80% of that, and I would do 3 sets of 5 with that. So it really depends which direction I'm going with. Now for the assistance giant set, I was doing 3 sets of 10, and I was mainly just doing exercises that would help increase the lifts that I just completed for that day and pump blood into that area so it was able to grow and I'm able to recover a lot faster. And then same thing with the accessory giant set. I would just hit areas that I know will help me improve in those big lifts. And then of course, I like to use it in giant set format, because if you use it in giant set format, then you're able to get a lot more done in a short amount of time. And one thing that I really did differently, which is probably a big no-no in conjugate, but it really worked for me, was I would combine my max effort and my dynamic effort on the same exact day. Because I really feel like that's where I got most of my results from, and was able to maintain my conditioning and my athleticism as I went up in size and strength. So now that you guys have seen the conjugate method in its entirety, and then you see how I like to set it up, it looks very intimidating and it looks like a lot of work. Let me tell you something. It is a lot of work and it is very intimidating. But I promise you that if you did this, and if you were eating right and getting enough nutrition and making sure that you were recovering on your days off and making sure that you were doing all of your accessories and warming up the correct way, you will build size and strength very fast, and you'll still be an athletic conditioned monster. So will the carnivore diet be able to support Frank as he moves through this workout? I don't know. So go ahead and follow along with our series and we'll see if he makes it. But leave a comment down in the bottom if you think he's going to make it or not. I'm very curious to think what you all think. I really appreciate everybody stopping by, and I hope that you learned something new. I'll see you next time. Thank you.